Welcome to the wide world of punting, where we talk about anything and everything in the world of punting. I'm Jacob Wynn. This is episode 10, and this is also the final episode of 2020. And the first segment is going to be chatting with Tristan from TopSport in Behind Bookie Lines, reflecting on 2020, a year like no other, a year that we hope we never see again. But I wanted to get his insights into how COVID specifically affected running a bookmaker. He shares his experiences with that. Next up, I've got Lukey Mack, who is a pro cricket punter or trades a number of sports, but basically a full-time professional punter that you may have seen share some tips and info across some of the big Facebook groups. It's not just a cricket chat, although cricket is quite relevant. We've got test matches, we've got Big Bash every day, but Luke talks about a theme that has come up quite a few times in this series, which is about specializing on an area or aspect of a sport that isn't as highly scrutinized. In his case, his experience making a lot of money on the women's Big Bash. He also talks a lot just about the general mindset of being a full-time professional punter who is successful, which I found really interesting. And he does dive into his process that he uses to make money live trading cricket. And again, I think some of the advice he shares regarding that could be applied to live trading numerous range of sports. I'm then going to share my own reflections on 2020, all pod results, NFL, NRL, and a little bit of my plans for 2021. Of course, I've got the Wide World Bet of the Week to bring it home. We're on a 3-bet slide, so I've been back into the lab trying my very best to cook up a successful bet for this weekend. I'll share that one at the end, of course. But firstly, here's Tristan. And as I said, he's going to share his experience running a bookie through COVID, but also as the NBA new season just tipped off last week, we started with a topic of how bookies set markets for a new season when you might have fundamental changes, you've got recent information, which is like the results in the first week or two of a season, versus the larger sample size historical results. So again, this applies to really any sport. And I'll give an example of where there was a real opportunity to make a lot of money, and we did in an NRL season. And it was the 2018 season where the NRL came out and said they're really going to clamp down on ruck infringements. And if you remember, 2018, especially the first 8 or 10 weeks, was an absolute penalty fest. It was historical numbers of penalties. There was no flow. It was basically the opposite of what we got in 2020 with the new rules. And there were games where there was literally not a try scored in the first half. You had 6-4. Teams took the 2 every opportunity because the game had no flow, was so stop-start, and because there was so many opportunities to take the 2. And the bookies didn't adjust at first, and we were betting so many no-try first 8 minutes because you figured if a team got a penalty, inside the red zone, there's a shot at goal there, and there's an opportunity to score a try gone, and there's 2 minutes off the clock while they kick a goal and convert. So no try first 8 minutes, which used to be priced at $1.90 both sides, and you guys have seen you basically don't get that anymore. But that's an example of an old way we used to make money that isn't usually available. But not only that, we were betting like under 3.5 tries first half. And as I said, there were tryless first halves, team tries under as opposed to points under, because teams were still racking up the points, but they weren't scoring tries. And I know people who are gaming that advantage even more, betting same game multis and hitting the points over, but the tries under, and getting magnified payouts, or team to score first, but the other team to score the first try, because it was so often that the first score was a penalty goal. So I think they eventually kind of remedied that, and they started to take the refs out of the game or swallow their whistle a little bit towards the end of that year. But it was an example where in the start of 2018, it was a huge opportunity because of a fundamental shift in the style of play. So that's our first topic with Tristan, talking about NBA, but again, it applies in a number of different sports. And in how do you tackle the beginning of a season? So let's start there with Tristan.
Because, if you're looking at one game, for example, there is a lot of variance in that. So you want to sort of try to identify what you feel is going to be the impact of any change, and then watch the first couple of weeks and see how that plays out. Because you might have a 18-12 game which goes unders, but there's been so many opportunities, so free-flowing, but the result is actually an unders result. So that doesn't necessarily change what you feel was right. So you've got to make sure you stick with your original gut for at least a 2 or 3 week period, unless there's something obviously wrong that you've missed, or something that you haven't factored in.
And it's about that not being too governed by what you've seen most recently, but at the same time, the most recent information is probably the most accurate. Like Some teams may just be a lot better this season. Some teams may be worse, and you can't ignore what they're doing this season and think, oh no, well, let's look at season 2021 NRL. If the Storm comes out and loses their first two games and the Broncos come out and win their first two, you're not going to have the Broncos a favourite over the Storm in round 3. So you are still going to rely on historically what you know of these teams, but you are also going to be looking at what's the reason that these teams might be playing differently this season.
Oh, for sure, 100%. And that as you say, that is the absolute trick, trying to weigh up and balance out those two things, because you have to respect what happened in years gone by, and you have to really also identify the reasons why there's been a sudden increase or decrease in the output. And I think that there's also a shift in players. Like if you've got a team that is completely restructured and they've got a completely new spine in rugby league, or a new addition of players, or they've lost some key players, then probably you place more credence on the recent form as opposed to last year's form. The Bulldogs might be a good example of that in the rugby league, where they have overhauled their side a little bit. So maybe, but that is probably going to be reflected in their first game's market. And that's where we go back to, as we sort of touched on last week, where, you rate all the players based on, a certain score and those sort of things. So it is difficult to try to balance it up, but you also need to just let it pass the eye test. You need to watch a lot of those games early. You need to really understand what's going on. If a team doesn't get the result, but they've brought a whole heap of new players in, but they look dangerous and they just aren't clicking in that final third or hitting those key shots in basketball, but the output and the possessions and getting themselves in the right position looks there, then you have to say, well, at some point these guys are going to click. When's that going to be? But then you can't be waiting forever for that to happen as well. So it's a difficult thing, and it creates variance, it creates opportunity. And that's where, I guess, from a punter's point of view, if you can focus on a couple of key teams, we've got to try to look at every team in the league. We've got to try to understand all of that. We've got to try to understand all the different markets. If you can focus on a little niche and go with your hypothesis like we discussed last week, and sort of say, well, I think these things are going to change. I think Atlanta's going to be significantly better. I'm going to watch them. I'm going to say, okay, well, I've got a tough road trip here, or they got this, or they got that. And you can sort of zone in on a couple of different teams. That's when you can find an edge, when particularly in our position, you're trying to, look at a whole heap of different variables over a myriad of different teams.
I think that's really good advice, and that you named the two teams that would be interesting. Like, if we think there's been a fundamental change in a team, then I want to look more closely at that team to make my assessment of what the next season holds for them. So you mentioned the Bulldogs. It's going to be extremely interesting to see how they play early and what difference Trent Barrett and the new additions make. Or the Broncos that I brought up, like Kevin Walters is there now. So are they playing with a new vigor? Do they look like they're playing together, and are they playing better footy, and not just base it purely on the final result? And I also find exactly what you said about specificity, I suppose, or watching a team closely. I love to just talk to people who are diehard supporters for a specific team about their team. Nobody follows a team closer than, a passionate fan for that team. And sometimes people pick up little insights in their own team. And even though I follow all these leagues really closely, like, you can't get that kind of level of intimate knowledge of a team like a true fan. Moving on, well, let's look back, because this is our final episode of 2020, and a year that we're never going to forget, and a year like no other, and hopefully a year that we don't experience for a long, long time. But COVID, has affected all facets of life. But I wanted you to maybe have some reflections on how it affected bookmaking in 2020. We know from a punting perspective that a lot of the sports that we all knew and loved just disappeared virtually overnight, and punters were looking for new things to adapt, to bet on, or ways to adapt. And so I'm wondering, well, how did you experience it from your side?
Yeah, so it's been a very turbulent year for everyone, and I guess from our point of view, we've been very lucky with particularly how racing has kept going. That's been a real godsend for bookmakers and for everyone stuck at home, to give people an interest in watching something throughout the year. I remember back in the early parts of the year, when the NRL and the AFL season both got cancelled. I think it was 1 week and 2 weeks into the season respectively. And I remember sitting there, it was a Sunday afternoon, I was just thinking, geez, this is going to make things very interesting, because the NBA, I think, had just dropped previously. And we as a business, we are probably different to the vast majority of the other bookmakers in Australia, where our sport and racing hold was split 50-50 last year, which in Australia, you generally find that it's more so that 75-25 split racing-wise. So for a lot of the bookmakers that are predominantly racing, even though it's a big chunk of revenue that goes when sport goes missing, they were guarded a little bit by the racing side of things. But with our sport being such a significant part, it was something that I was like, well, we got to try to address this. We got to understand how we're going to get through this period, because you didn't know at that stage how long everything was going to be out of play for. And it also created a lot of interest in sports like your table tennis, like your Belarusian soccer, these sort of things, which, no disrespect to those leagues, but they certainly aren't massive betting propositions on a normal day-to-day basis. It was difficult because there was a lot of punters that probably had an edge in these sports that, the bookmakers really didn't know how to price a lot of these things, table tennis in particular. So when it was that constant 24/7 just barrage of events, it did make trading quite difficult. We have had to ease off on our table tennis offerings since, because it's just a very hard sport to keep up with. But it gave sporting punters something to look at over the period, and it was great from that respect. But the racing was the thing that really kept us going over that period, because I suppose, unfortunately for the tab, they had to close a lot of their shops. So there was a lot of punters that used to going into pubs or into tabs or whatever and betting over the counter. They had to find different avenues. So as a result, those punters were looking for different bookmakers to operate with, and we were lucky enough to pick up a number of customers over that period. So now the job for us is over this next 2021, when hopefully we are back to a bit of normality, demonstrate to all the new customers that have come on board, when they have got the freedom of being able to pick wherever they want to bet, that we've got a product that we feel is superior to our competitors, and they are going to get better value every time they come to us. So
it's funny because we talked last week about information, and you've got your guys scanning Twitter because you need to be on top of all the new information. But if the best player on one of the Belarusian football teams, has a sprained ankle and is out, I mean, you don't know which guy is the best player or how important he is. But that is fascinating that punters did turn their attention to obscure sports. I know the other one, which you can tell me if anyone punted on, was esports. Everyone was getting interested in, and that's a type of sport that is continuously growing in popularity and following. But the other point you made, I think I heard Sky Racing broke viewership records through April as well, like on Saturday afternoons, when usually there would have been all the other sports competing. So was that a trend you noticed as well, that not only the customers you picked up that would have been betting at venues, but sports punters trying their hand at racing as well, because it was the only kind of action on?
Yeah, definitely. We found that a lot. We also found it was very key how punters switched from, not switched, but they picked up greyhound racing and harness racing. Greyhound racing in particular really, really grew for us over that period. And I think it was, punters that maybe were used to betting, particularly on the greyhounds, on a Saturday night where they might be watching the footy. They might be used to watching the footy on a Saturday night. They'd switch and bet on the greyhounds. So the Sky Racing really would have gone through the roof, and they were quite smart as well. They actually gave everyone free access to Sky Racing too, which was a real good thing from them. But it really helped turnover all around the traps. But one of the funny things you're referring to with the other smaller sports, the Belarusian and these sort of smaller soccer leagues, we got into a bit of trouble early in those leagues, because we had our model based off the other the main leagues where there probably aren't as many goals. And I think there was a couple of Asian leagues, maybe the Kuwait League or these sort of things that we were betting on, where the expected goals in every game were well and truly over 2.5, which is where we set our line at. And obviously we factored that into the 2.5 betting, but we got into a lot of trouble with the wide end of our model, where the over 4.5 and over 5.5 and over 6.5 goals just weren't reflective of the true price. So a couple of our punters really took advantage of that. So it was one of those things you normally wouldn't really put a lot of time into trying to get those sort of things right, but we had to in that period, and hopefully that's made the model a lot stronger come weaker games, because it's a little bit different. Like the soccer, for example, when you get to a World Cup, you've got the best of the best competing. Which you've got a Rugby Union World Cup or a Cricket World Cup or these sort of things, you generally have a couple of teams that go in there that are, very heavy underdogs in every game. So they're the ones that we can, use when we're getting a lot of activity to really help sharpen our model on those wide spectrum games. But you don't get that opportunity as much in soccer, because generally the leagues are pretty evenly matched with the relegation and promotion system. So that was just one that caught us a bit off guard, and gave us a bit of time to think about how to make that more efficient. So that was a good one. And esports, as you touched on, we're licensed in New South Wales, and we were actually never able to legally bet on esports up until this year. We'd been pushing for it for a couple of years, and it was something that it was a bit of an unknown for us how much turnover was out there on the esports. And then when everything shut down, we really ramped up the negotiation, for lack of a better word, to try to get this sport approved. And luckily it came through, just after everything shut down. So we were able to turn that on, and it's been a really good. I know nothing about it. I'm not even going to pretend to know I know anything about esports, but there is a good chunk of customers out there that do enjoy it, and it's a growing sport, as you say. I think it's one of the most popular sports. One of the big bookmakers in overseas, I think it's their third or fourth most popular betting market, which is amazing, and it just goes to show something that I know nothing about can still, is very, very interesting from a betting point of view for a whole heap of people out there.
That's where we know we're both getting old, where it's like these young kids and what they're interested in. Yeah, even it's beyond me as well, and I'm interested in all sports, but that's maybe even a bridge too far for me. The other, I guess, challenge that you would have faced would have been voiding or how you result a lot of futures that got placed before COVID, because it took us all by surprise.
Yeah, it was a massive challenge. Like we've probably countered that a little bit this year, where we have got rules in place to protect if something were to happen. Or not even protect us, protect the punters as well, because our mantra is just to be fair for all parties, and that's what we tried to do over this series. It was a very difficult situation, depending on where each league was at the time it was suspended. Like the AFL and the NRL was a little bit easier because it was only very early in the season. So what we actually did was we gave all of our punters the option to either cancel their bets or to keep them on. So the punters were obviously, heavily advantaged by this, because if a team was 0-2, we gave them the opportunity to cancel the bets. If they were 2-0, we gave them the opportunity to leave the bets on. But we thought that was the fairest in the situation. Obviously, it was just a complete unknown of what was going to happen, the season length. Like we sort of made that decision once we knew that the season was going to be shortened.
And I've seen your adaptation stuff like we talked about last week, when now people could bet on a season-long winning percentage on NBA teams rather than win total, with that acknowledgement that, the set number of games they're going to play is not set in stone, as we always kind of assumed it was. I know someone that was really disappointed in one of the rulings was former podcast host Alex. Alex and I had a couple of head-to-head season win totals bets, and I was not the favorite in either of them. I needed Utah and Houston to go over on their win totals to beat Alex for a couple of decent side bets. And when the regular season got wiped out with like 28 games or so to go, well, as far as I was concerned, they were void. Alex thought I should pay him as a winner because they were below, their win percentage rate. So even we had a dispute that we had to work out. It's not the reason he left the pod, but it's a dicey one to handle for sure. But hey, I honoured my bet against Alex. I had Ben Simmons to make 10 or more threes last year. He only made 2. And so I said, hey, I lost that, even though you never know, Ben Simmons might have made 8 threes in the final month of the season, or a couple of months of the season. So it's about always being fair. I appreciate you were as well. And I appreciate all your time and insights that you've given us in 2020. That has been one positive for this season, has been you sharing your knowledge and your insights and being part of the pod. And it's going to continue. I think we've got about 6 episodes after this one to take us through to mid-February. So I wish you a happy new year as well.
Yeah, I've got a little guest here who just wants to say hello. So sorry, I'm babysitting duty. So say hello. Now, Daddy's just going to finish this, and then Mummy's upstairs. Sorry about that.
That's all good.
I've had a great time partnering with you guys. I think it's been, I've really enjoyed giving my insights. I hope the listeners out there, feel the same. And I see a couple of items on the post where people ask questions like, "Oh, I love it." If anyone's got anything they want to hear from us or want to understand, or feel free to put it forward. I feel like we're a very open book. We can discuss anything. I'm proud of how we run our business. So if there's anything that people want clarity on, I'm more than happy to do that. I'm really excited about the back end of this season we're doing, and I think it's been very well received. I think you're doing a great job sort of keeping things going, obviously with Alex moving on. So I want to thank you for involving us. I hope the listeners out there are enjoying it, and hopefully we can keep providing good insight, because at the end of the day, I love punting. I love bookmaking, and I just want as many people to enjoy it in the way I do, and anything we can do to pass that information on is something I'm very happy to do, because it's such a great game, and that's why we bookmake in the way we do. We want to make sure that we're fair for every punter, so that everyone can get that enjoyment out. They're obviously not going to win every bet. You are going to lose some, and it can get frustrating. I know that firsthand, but we just want to make sure that you can get the maximum amount of enjoyment possible out of this great game, and people like yourself that are putting on shows like this, I think, really helps that.
So thanks again to Tristan for all the insights he has shared with us this year. I've told you guys before, there's another 6 episodes of Wide World of Punting that will be coming up in 2021, and we're going to try and get a lot more out of Tristan, more stories, more insights, and I want to give you guys the opportunity to ask your questions as well. So within the Tripod Punters Tips forum, I'll put up polls where you guys can provide the questions. We'll have an Ask Tristan Anything segment in January for sure. My own reflections on 2021, also a crazy year for me, as well as bringing a little person into the world. I lost a big person in my life, at least in my pod life. That was Alex moving on, which happened couple of months ago now and thereabouts, and I'll touch on that. But as we went into 2020, I think Alex and I knew that we'd given 5 full years of the pod, and this was going to be season number 6 or year number 6, because we do multiple seasons in a year. And we've certainly, worked full-time hours on this. We're easily putting 50, 60, 70 hours of work into doing the pod. Now, I don't want people to feel sorry for me when I say 60 or 70 hours a week. I mean, that's including watching 20, 30 plus hours of live sport, which is an important part of knowing the sports intimately enough to find advantages. It's also something that I'm very, thankful that I get to do, and I'm certainly not complaining about, but I just want people to appreciate the amount of hours that does go into this. But it certainly wasn't something that was paying us full-time wage to run everything that we did run, which is why we did kind of hint a couple of times this year that we may hit a crossroads where we were going to hit a point where if we, couldn't be more successful, for lack of a better term, then we just couldn't sustain it, because Alex spoke about getting up early and driving Ubers. I teach at a university, as well as becoming a father and trying to be a good person to everyone else in my life. I don't have unlimited time and energy, but anything I do, I always try and do my best. So even though we thought 2020 could be our last year, certainly came in wanting to give it our best. And looking at the results, which I'll have up on the screen, 2020 began with the NFL playoffs for the 2019-20 season, and we actually killed it in the playoffs. We were riding the Kansas City Chiefs there, but we won every weekend of the playoffs. We went 22-9 on our best bets, which is over 70%. Our multis, that's not just in 2020, that includes the 2019 NFL, plus 108 units, which I don't think people appreciate how good that is. And I'll tell you now, a big reason we went plus 108 units on multis. For one, we were taking advantage of the Ladbrokes and Ned's double payout on same-game multis, but we were winning a lot of same-game multis, and I hope people don't forget that, because Alex was getting a lot of grief in the last few weeks before he left the pod because of a 5 or 6 week losing streak on same-game multis. It's like people forget really quickly that Alex was a mad scientist with the amount of same-game multis he was winning last NFL season. It was absolutely silly, and it was a big reason that we won over 100 units on NFL multis. As I've said before, this NFL season, we've won a lot of multis. They've been more so the round multis, incorporating a lot of games, and we never can predict which long odds tips we give out are going to win and which aren't, and they can be highly volatile. But that was great results for us. And then 2020, that is our number one focus. So we give everything. As we know, we went a couple of weeks in. Now, if memory serves me correct, we were only like 15-13 after the first 2 weeks. So we were basically break even when you're betting at $1.90 after 2 weeks. And we did warn you guys, like 60% NRL seasons probably aren't achievable anymore. The edges that we used to find aren't always there. And I talked about an example of 2018, something that came along and used to bet, no try first 8, which again, when it didn't win, people would say it's such a stupid bet, but it was winning 60% of the time when we used to bet on low total games, especially if there was rain and especially if we saw defensive sides. But it's just an example along with many. I put up a video earlier this year about why it's basically impossible to win 60% for a full season. We came out after the COVID break, May 28, salute Sir Peter V'landys. He got us back on track. We got 18 more rounds of footy, plus finals, plus origin. We went 170 and 102, and that includes like the 53% start, like going, as I said, 15-13 or whatever it was in the first 2 weeks. 63% on best bets in front of your eyes, breaking it down, sharing the reasoning why. Multis plus 50 units. I really think we got a bit unlucky with a couple of weeks where we killed it. There was just that one game that let us down. We could have cleaned up on the multis even more. But look, I think I have to admit that 2020 season, Alex has stitched me up by leaving the pod at the end of this year, because that's never going to be done again. I really think if you're in the high 50s, you're doing extremely well, just with the number of people that are now getting involved and trying to find an edge and a sophistication and knowledge in the marketplace. I think maybe, while you don't want to admit it, maybe a bit of luck comes in with a couple of close ones that helps you really get any type of winning percentage above 60%. But there it was, and it's something that we're very proud of. And then the NFL 2020 season started right around when NRL finals were kicking off, so we never really had a lapse in footy, and it's been a bit more modest. I think we did start 70% in the NFL. We tried to say that that's just absolutely unsustainable, and as I come to you today, 58 and 46, which is 56% on the NFL, which by a pod standard brings our overall stats down. But by any kind of professional tipster in the world standard, 56% is still a great winning clip. As well as that, multis plus 77 units. And as I said, we've won numerous long odds round multis. And again, while that might not impress people a ton, that's a really good season that we've put together so far. And Alex was involved in the first, probably at least half of that season as well. When you are plus 77 units in multis, you're going to have to lose a lot of multis in a row to claim that you're not up. So overall, 2020 has been an excellent year for tipping. It's been a great year for, I guess, launching Wide World of Punting, this pod, and just engagement and growing the audience. And I appreciate that it grows because we don't have like a marketing budget. We're not clever with our marketing. We probably should be doing more, but we really only grow because you guys watch and you keep watching and you tell your mates, and basically that's simple. And that's all I ask. If you enjoy the pod, please help us spread the word, because I'm 100% committed to run it back 2021. And while I can sit here confidently and genuinely telling you I'm going to be bringing everything I've got and confident in my knowledge and passion that I can help you guys improve your NRL punting again in 2021, I understand how hard it's going to be. It's going to be hard without two people monitoring the markets, watching the games, collectively sharing our knowledge and disagreeing at time to weed out the less strong plays. So I just want to say once again a massive thanks to Alex for everything that he put in for the last 6 years. It just would not have been possible. All the results that we've been able to provide, I think, getting near to 5,000 best bets. But if you would have included all the multis we've shared, we've probably shared somewhere near 5,000 plays for you guys, and a lot of content, and had a lot of fun along the way. And we've appreciated your support. But yeah, there's just no way. While I think I can, give it my best shot next year, there's just no way this would have all been done with one person. So once again, pull one out for Alexi as 2020 comes to a close. Now let's move to my chat with Lukey Mack, who you may be familiar with. I've chatted to him before, actually, in the COVID break earlier this year. He shared a lot of his knowledge and insights in how he makes money, predominantly using Betfair, but also getting on bookies like TopSport that let him on for decent limits as a full-time professional punter, which is a job I'm sure a lot of people listening would dream about or aspire to do. So I think you'll get a lot out of hearing his mentality, his approach, and some of his insights. So let's jump on to the chat with Lukey Mack.
But yeah, I think it's all going pretty well. The Women's Big Bash was, quite successful for me. It always has been. I spent quite a lot of time analysing that competition some years ago when I saw that it was sort of up and coming, and I thought, well, I could go and learn heaps about T20 cricket, the men's stuff, where there's a lot of eyeballs on it already, and it's going to be super competitive, and there's going to be a lot of competition in that space. Or I could go and learn about the women's game, where it's going to be less competitive. And I think I've spoken about this before. I can't remember whether I covered it last time that we chatted, but I come from that poker background, and it's like, if you look around the table and you can't see the fish, then you're the fish, So it's like same sort of thing still applies with sports. If you going into really competitive areas, it's going to be a lot harder to beat. So yeah, decided that, spent a lot of time learning about it. And what was important wasn't learning about, everybody knows about Alyssa Healy and her capabilities. Everybody knows about Elise Perry. I mean, even if you're just a casual viewer, everybody's heard these names. They know these names. But what I wanted to know was who was the sort of second tier or third tier group
But my question would be something we've talked about a lot before, like, is there the liquidity for you? Could you get limit size bets with your typical bookies? And I know you utilize Betfair a lot. Like, that would be my worry, that there wouldn't be as many others out there that are willing to trade enough volume for you to make a good profit.
Yeah, well, I'm obviously like heavily restricted with where I can sort of bet. It's difficult for me to get bets on, but there are still a number of places that, and as the women's big bash has gone on, it's become now this year they had it as their own event. They had their own window, and it was kind of, obviously this is a unique year, but with COVID, it was one of the first. Apart from, in the summer anyway, it was one of the first things that was up and ready to be, take bets on, really. So I think the bookies were kind of keen for that. But obviously Top Sport, Tab have some markets, and then Betfair. But Top Sport's coverage of it is insane. I mean, I think we're talking hundreds of markets on each game. They'll offer balls faced, runs scored, opening partnerships, bowler matchups. It's mental, the markets that they've got. So there's plenty there to bet on. And then obviously Betfair, which is where I do most of my business. But it'd probably shock people to know that there's sort of 10-20 million dollars matched on these women's big bash games.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's heaps. Like for me, there's plenty of liquidity, and so I'd imagine for most people, there's more than enough opportunity to get set if you're interested in it. So, and then most of the liquidity on Betfair comes from India. Like, they're just mad punters. Like, they love it. They love their cricket. It's really only cricket and hockey over there. That's sort of. I mean, they got other sports too, but cricket's kind of the big one that they share, I guess. And then the fact that it is sort of widely bet on. But they bring all the liquidity. So it really doesn't matter. As long as there's a bat and a ball and a couple of sets of stumps, the Indians are prepared to bet on it, basically.
Well, that's a really good point, because Betfair is international, and with India, population over 1 billion, maybe not everyone understands that there is a large proportion of that country that are very affluent, that have as much, money to bet with, or more than plenty of Aussie punters. So if you're betting into the same market they are, and if you've got enough knowledge on it, clearly you can have an edge. As we move into, obviously, the men's big bash, and by all means talk about how you've gone with the test matches, my other question is, how do you define success? But do you have an ROI sense of, like, obviously I've got an edge, so the more I turn over, if I can maintain this kind of edge, then that's going to generate, X number of profit. And I understand, like, it's not about being greedy, but you've got to compensate the hours you're putting in to justify doing it as a full-time job, I suppose.
Yeah, I think like every edge has probably some level of ceiling on it.
Sure.
So it's not just a matter of saying, well, I make, just grab any arbitrary figure, but let's just say I make 5% profit on turnover. So I turned over $1 million last year, so I made 50 grand. Next year, I'm just going to turn over 10 million and I make 10 times that. It doesn't work like that in a way, because, if I go to most bookmakers and say, hey, just give me 10 times the amount, it's not necessarily going to work that way. So some of those edges are going to be capped by the amount that you can get on. Same in Betfair. Even though the liquidity is big, there are some edges in the way that the bet is placed, or the way that the game is sort of formulating, that you can only get a certain amount on at that particular time. So it's not as simple as to say that my ROI is this, so just stake up. It doesn't work exactly like that. But each edge, I think, and each bet type and where you can get the bet on definitely has an ROI attached to it. And I had an average number that sort of that was there, and so I had a rough understanding of it. And I think I probably do have some like sort of targets in my mind that I sort of set out and think, well, if I could make this year, that would be great. But I'm not like, if I don't get there, I'm not like just headless about it. You know, like I think to myself, like, roughly our expenses might be sort of like 60 grand a year. If I could make that, and I'd just be so grateful to be able to do that, compared to going out and doing something else. then that's great. And anything else that comes on top of that is a super bonus. But I do have some aspirations, and I'd like to sort of get to these numbers. I think also I am mindful of the fact that things won't always be great forever. So I do try to make the most out of it. Again, coming from that poker background, I've seen what's happened, regulatory and other ways where things can just be taken from you at any moment. So I do have a bit of a, I guess, hustler mentality in a way, like where I do try to sort of make the most out of it. And I'm fully aware that one day I'm sure it'll be a gradual thing, and it is a gradual thing, and it is happening already, and it's naive to think that it isn't. But it will be a time one day where I wake up and go, shit, I don't think I can win anymore, or not, certainly not at the rate that I have been, and not, and then it could be just so many different reasons as to why that happens. But until that happens, I'm just trying to sort of make the best of what I can. And I think, like, for people listening, you don't have to be making obscene amounts of money. If you're winning, even if you're just getting to a break-even point, like, you should be tapping yourself on the back, because that is something that most people can't do. And you're ahead of the game already. And then you can maybe just tweak a few little things here and there to maybe kick up to being profitable or super profitable in the space. So.
And I imagine, especially cricket, it's a kind of sport that can lend itself to be maybe found profit edges found through analytics. And I imagine just as the marketplace gets more sophisticated, and even we're talking in years to come with like AI models and stuff, like those edges that you're finding, those inefficiencies will start to get ironed out. And we talk a lot on this show with a number of punters about how you have to evolve. And I'm sure you have, and edges that you used to find 5 years ago are not the same ones that you are still finding now. But could you give an example in a game, either, I don't know if you're going to share any of your current trade secrets of how you're making money on a daily basis, or how you might apply yourself tonight on the Big Bash, but maybe a past example of ways that you used to be able to make money either pre-match or live trading cricket?
Yeah, sure. And I think one of the great things about cricket is it's a little more difficult to model than some other sports, and I think just because of the fact that conditions play such a big part. So
right, and they're never exactly the same.
No, and I know, like, weather can change and stuff in a football game, and they play home ground, and there are some things that change, but generally, it's still 100 meters by 50 wide and whatever, so it's all kind of, the dimensions are all kind of the same, and there's a lot of similarities, but the 22 yards that you play on in cricket can change, and obviously in test matches it can change dramatically. And people probably laugh, with the roads that we get here in Australia generally. Although some of the pitches this summer have been decent. I thought the pitch at the MCG was great. It offered something to everybody. It was good test match cricket. But yeah, I think the conditions mean that it's been a bit tougher for the big guys to model it. Some of the other sports are what we would say is pretty close to solved. I think still, hour to hour and day to day, there are still efficiencies, and game to game there are inefficiencies, and there's people out there that are beating horse racing, for instance, which a lot of people would say is very solved, because over the long term, a lot of the $2 shots, the $2 shots on Betfair over a huge sample win 50-50, but race to race there are going to, if you can pick off the ones that are valued at $2, then you can. But yeah, I think cricket's a great one for people to get involved in because, for a few factors, I think it's not solved yet. And the other thing is that you have the opportunity, and this is probably the number one thing that I would say to people if they want to get started, is to trade test match cricket, just because it moves so slowly. You've got 5 days and you're able to, adjust your positions. It moves a lot slower. In a T20, it can be very, very fast moving, and it's all a mental game, right? So like watching your book go from red to green in a matter of balls, or in one ball, sometimes in T20, can make people headless. But in a test match, it's less likely. a boundary is not worth nearly as much in a test as it is in a T20 when there's only 240 balls max. So, yeah, I would say that definitely, sort of get started in the long format stuff. And look, one of the things, and that sort of leads me to one of the things that still works today. And it's funny because, like, you go through a lot of Facebook pages, including the one that you guys have, and everybody wants to back the draw. Like I don't know where this fascination has come from, but I can only imagine it's come from commentators and pundits, because even I noticed on Fox the other day they were. So it must have been, I think it was probably before the first test or maybe after the first test, and they were asking Border and a whole bunch of the other Fox commentary team to give their analysis and then give the score prediction for the series, and almost everyone went 2-1. 2-1, 2-1, 2-1. Like to either side, they either went to India or Australia, but that suggests that there's going to be a draw in there. Like, and it's just they're just so uncommon. It's not funny, and unless there's really weather involved, they pretty much don't happen. I mean, you've only got to look at the test results out of the first two tests. Like, I think they were both 3-day tests. I think there's so much time in test match cricket. It's mental. People think that. And then combine the fact that nobody can bat anymore. Like, it's basically a whole bunch of gun bowlers getting around.
If I can jump in and speculate, I would just guess that it's because people who've ever bet on a draw and then the heavens have opened and it's rained for 2 or 3 days, that's the easiest win you'll get, is when there's not even any game played and you win. And I think people chasing that super easy win, and it's almost become maybe a fantasy that back the draw at the right time, the rain comes down. But what you're making is a really fascinating point, that what people want to happen or think happens quite often is not the case, therefore creating market inefficiency.
Yeah, you've only got to go and look at the numbers. It just doesn't happen very often. So, there's definitely an edge there that's still available, that you could, be opposing the draw at the right times in games. And it really doesn't take much to kind of work it out. All you need to do, and this goes for almost any market on Betfair, is you just need to sit there and have the market up and watch the game. It's really as simple as that. And the more screen time that you put in, the more that you'll go, oh shit, that was interesting, like what the market did there. Or there's a lot of nuances in the game and sort of situational things in the game where one particular selection in the market just basically can't be the price that it is right now, and it's not already baked in. So, like, one of those situations might be where it was especially good when Warner was opening and Australia was sort of rollicking along, probably maybe 3 or 4 years back, flat decks, and basically in the third inning, say it was sort of tightish, but Australia had got in with maybe a nice-ish lead of maybe 50 to 100 runs or something in the coming into their second innings, and the market wouldn't necessarily work out that Warner's going to come out and be super aggressive, right? So two things are going to happen. And maybe the first two innings have taken maybe most of 3 days up. So we're into the third session of day 3 maybe. And Warner's going to come out and he's going to be super aggressive. He's going to be trying to hit the cover of it. So one of two things is going to happen, right? A wicket's going to fall, or it's going to be fast runs. Right. And at that time, because we're into the end of the day, coming into the end of day 3, and we've only completed 2 innings, everyone wants to get on the draw, and the draw's crashing. But what the market hasn't worked out is that fast runs sets up the game, right? So Warner's going to score quickly. He's going to go at, probably 3 runs per over. And then if he bats for any extended period of time, sets up a big base, the Aussies are going to be able to cloud at 4 or 5 runs per over for the back end of their innings and set up a good chase on day 5 for someone to chase whoever their opponent was, or wickets fall, which is also bad for the draw. So there's moments there where the market hasn't worked out what's going to happen, and sitting there and watching the charts, you can see it. If you watch the live market, watch the games, you'll be able to pick those things up. And one of the other big things that I would sort of suggest to people is, as I've said, trading test matches. But whatever you're trading, you kind of need to trade in blocks based on the length of the whole match. So if I'm trading a test, I'm generally not worrying about what result is going to win after 5 days. I'm trying to think about what's going to happen in this next session. Maybe like at the end of day 3, sometime in day 4, I start thinking about the winner. Sometimes it can be earlier, but generally I'm trying not to think about that until later. I'm just trying to think about what's happening in this session. If I'm trading ODIs, and the disclaimer on this with 50 over stuff is I don't even think I'm profitable on it. Like I think last time I don't track anything anymore in my spreadsheet. But I just think I haven't been very good at it. I don't really enjoy the format either. It's kind of a bit yeah, I don't know. The middle section is really boring for me. Like I just don't enjoy it. So that's probably a part of it too. Like you got to trade things that you enjoy, in my opinion. But yeah, again, if with that, I would probably be trying to think about maybe 10 over blocks if I was trading ODIs. And then T20, I'm kind of thinking like 6 balls, 6 to 9 balls. And that's really it. And every ball's an event. I'm trying to pick up field placings, potential bowler changes, how many overs are left by each bowler. So then I can get an idea of what sort of matchups are coming between a bat and a ball, and where the captain might go. And I've got a sheet. Actually, it's not hanging up anymore, but I have it somewhere on my computer. But the number one thing is kind of like my rules for trading T20 cricket. And the number one thing on it is punish bad captaincy. I used to piss and moan about really bad captaincy. I would be like, I wouldn't have gone with that bowler matchup. Say there's 3 overs left, and three separate bowlers have got 1 over each, and I would go with A, B, C would be mine, and he decides to go with, or she decides to go with CBA. And I used to blow up, sit there and just go mental. Oh, what a terrible captain! And now I'm just like, great. This has given me an opportunity to punish that captaincy. So I no longer piss and moan about it. Instead, I just punish it. Like if I think that it's such a bad decision and I'm so right about, if I trust myself and I believe in my systems and what I think about the game, then if I'm so right, then just bet the opposite, or whatever it may be.
Or if you agree with the captain decision, then you might get on the fielding team.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So like if they bring on the right bowler to that batsman at that time with what I think is the right field, great. There's as I said, have the match up, have the markets up, and you'll be surprised the sort of things that you can actually just pick up by watching it. But yeah.
And what resonates with me is you're saying like, find something you enjoy, because if you enjoy it, you're going to be engaged in it more. And I'm kind of sensing for you're getting a sense of the pace and the mentality. And I'm sure it applies in T20 as well. If you can sense the batting team is about to launch, then again, it's setting up either there's going to be a surge of runs or there's going to be potentially a mini collapse, and you can trade accordingly as well. So it's about sensing when a mindset is going to change in the batting or bowling team.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. I mean, like one thing that you can see sometimes is just the intent of batsmen. Like they might come out and they might just be sort of nudging and knocking it around, and then all of a sudden, he's clearing the front leg and looking to put it over cow corner. So, the game has changed there.
And
right?
A player might like swing and miss, I imagine, twice to end over. And so it won't be reflected in somebody who's just looking at like the stats of a couple of dot balls in a row. But you've seen, okay, he's kind of flicked the switch here. He's going for broke at this point in the game.
Totally, yeah. So like 1 or 2 things is going to happen now. It's wickets or runs, isn't it? So yeah, it's definitely there's certainly things that you can pick up with the intent of players, listening just to, the access that we have these days with players mic'd up and things. I know last night at the death there, you were able to hear, sort of Finch talking to his bowler and what he was after and, what plans he had and the fields that he had. And I know Twitter was going berserk about, sort of bowling full and wide with mid-off up. A lot of people disagreed with that, So, if you disagree with it so much, then it's just simple to oppose it, right? Like, you don't have to piss and moan about these things in the way that the captain goes. You actually have at your fingertips the ability to prove that person wrong, and you will get direct feedback by the way of either winning or losing the bets that you place over a long period of time. So, like, that's great. I think that's like really cool. It's like, everybody wants to give their opinion on stuff and give, their ideas, but when it comes to actually putting dollars on the line, it's a little bit different. So yeah, like, just put your money where your mouth is after you sort of pick these things off. That's really all you have to do. So,
well, I think you put it best there. And I know we could talk for longer, but I really appreciate this chat because you gave some real insights into how you approach your punting. And I love hearing different punters' approaches, especially people who've proven to be successful, because there's not just one way to go about punting. But I also love the fact that you just shared a bit of the mindset of a professional punter and not being greedy and not trying to, hit a home run every time and just sticking to your process, which I think is really wise words. So thank you for your time. And hopefully we'll talk again in the next year, but Happy New Year.
Thank you, mate.
Time for the Wide World Bet of the Week. And I'm officially on the schneid because I've lost the last 3 weeks in a row. And that brings the overall record to just 4 wins, 4 losses. But because of the plus odds we've had with a $3 odd winner and a couple at $3.50, we are still healthily in profit, ROI 142%, but it's no fun losing. And while I try my best to come up with good plays for us, we do need to understand nothing is given, as I keep trying to say. And if we look back to last week, took the highest individual score in the Boxing Day test to be larger than the Brooklyn Nets team total in their Christmas Day match. Now, they did us no favours. They scored 123 when they were predicted to score around 115, and I was hoping they'd be under that. And that came back to bite us. They could not miss a 3 in the second half, piled on, over 20 more points in the second half than they did in the first half. And look, it didn't look pretty when Australia started off quite measly with the bat. India comes out stronger. The captain, Rahane, goes in at the end of day 2, 100 and something not out. We're a big favourite to cash at that point, and he's run out for 112, which is not common for someone in a test match at a key stage. That's the way it goes, and that just goes to show that trying to find a good bet, which I stand by, and I make that bet every day of the week if I had the chance again, does not guarantee a result. So sometimes we make great bets, we still lose. Sometimes you make a bad bet, you get lucky and you win. And it'd be nice to have some luck around the corner soon, but we've just got to make our own luck for now and just try and find good odds. And this week, it's a 5-leg multi, so you might think that's not going to be the way to turn our luck around, but I feel very strongly about these 5 sides. I want to include college football, which I have not talked a lot about, but I did share a futures play on the NFL pod of Clemson Tigers to win the national championship. I do love college football, though I haven't followed as closely this year. And the college football playoffs are on this weekend. They both take place Saturday morning in Australia. It's basically the 4 strongest college football programs in the US, 2 elimination playoff games to make the championship game, which will be about 10 days later. And we need the 2 favourites to get up. So first we've got Alabama. They've been an absolute juggernaut this season, haven't lost a game. They're a 20-point favourite against Notre Dame. They're going to win this game comfortably. We've got Clemson, who I just alluded to. Now, they've got Trevor Lawrence, a quarterback, who is a name, if you follow NFL, you already know about this guy, pretty much consensus #1 pick next year in the pros, and this is his final season in college. He won the title with them a couple of years ago. He's had a rough season, literally had COVID and was out for a couple of weeks. He's back, they're gelling, and they've rebounded from that loss they had when he was out. They'll beat Ohio State as well. They're about a 7 or 8 point favourite, so it's no lock, but I feel pretty confident they'll be too good in this one. And then NFL Week 17, what I like is I'm continuing the theme here that I'm picking 5 good teams that have to win to keep their season alive. The Cleveland Browns have had a good year, but after losing to the Jets last week, must rebound this week. Now, you might be thinking, how's this safe? They're playing the Steelers. The Steelers are locked in to their spot, and I think it's highly likely the Steelers, after a horrendous year with scheduling and the way they've been mucked around and they lost their bye week, this can be the Steelers' bye week. Steelers should rest key players. Browns should get a comfortable win there. The Ravens, they've come good. They also had their season kind of thrown into disarray with COVID and with a couple of upset losses. I know they cost us money along the way, but they're back on track now. Must win to secure a playoff spot. If they lose, they may still sneak in, but they don't want to leave that to fate. They're going to get the job done against Cincinnati, who should not be able to match them. And the Colts, I know the Colts will not underestimate the Jaguars. Jaguars are 1-14. That one win was against the Colts in round 1, which ultimately might cost the Colts a spot in the playoffs, but they've got to win on Monday, Australian time, to give themselves a chance. They're like a 2-touchdown favourite. They're actually a really good team that I think would, have opportunity to win playoff games. I bet against the Colts last week with the Steelers, and I think I got very lucky for the Steelers to win that game. The Colts managed to throw that one away. They won't make the same mistake this week. That's a 5-leg multi, and I've got them also all to combine for at least 120 or more points. So we're doing that to boost our odds up that little bit more. And look, the college football especially is very high scoring. I think Alabama and Clemson could easily put up 70 of that 120 on the Saturday before we even get to the NFL game. So I'm very confident if these 5 teams win, we'll get the points. And I think when you bet on a very short favorite, like a couple of these teams are $1.10, the one risk you have is that the big favorite takes the underdog lightly and kind of slips on a banana peel. But with the stakes couldn't possibly be higher in these games, I don't think we get any complacency. Therefore, I think all these 5 sides win, and we're getting $3.50. So I'm not going safer to try and break the losing streak. I'm just going for value as I do every week. If you like those sides and if you agree with the value in there, you can jump on that, max stake $100. And that'll do it for another week. So again, if you're interested in NFL, my week 17 preview, and it's always a crazy one because it's the final week of the season and a lot can happen, especially with the new playoff structure. That'll be about 15 or so minutes breaking down my favorite angles and why on Saturday. Otherwise, Happy New Year, guys. Thank you to you, the people who tune in, and whether you watch or listen, especially those that engage and give us feedback and comment and share their knowledge, or just let us know what they think of the show and how it can be better. I wouldn't put this effort in every week to try and create a show that I am proud of, that I can share with you guys, unless I knew that there was plenty of people out there that appreciate it. So I appreciate you. So have a Happy New Year. I will see you in 2021, bringing it back and hopefully to celebrate a winning Wide World Bet of the Week and bring lots more great content and great tips. But as always, gamble responsibly. Lego.